Hello, today we'll be sewing Almila dress together. It is a midi dress with feminine design, featuring soft line and delicate shaping. Plus, it is super easy and you don't need a lot of materials. I will be using silk velvet with lycra, but you can find more about fabric recommendation in the description. As you can see, I am not cutting at once. I am cutting the big pieces first, then the small ones from the leftover from the sides. This method saved me some fabric. But one point you have to be careful about if you are using velvet, which I highly recommend, make sure to pay attention to the nap direction, grain line while cutting. As you may know, velvet has a certain direction. And after we are done with cutting, we will start assembling our dress from the front top pieces. But first, there's a detail I want to mention. You should apply interfacing to the front and back necklines as well as the facings before you start sewing. I didn't do it at this stage because I normally skip it and I like my necklines a little looser. But since this is a tutorial, I realized I have to show you the proper way. So I added the interfacing after the sewing the shoulder seams and it was a little bit harder. That is why I recommend doing it before you start sewing. And it will be a little bit spoiler from the future, but when you apply the interfacing, it should look like this. And now let's jump back in our time machine, go back. I assembled the front top pieces, searched the seam allowance, and pressed them open with an iron. Then I will place the front skirt, the bodies, right sides together, and sew the seam. Serge the edges and press again. As you can see, I'm using a cotton fabric because home use irons aren't like industrial ones, so it's better to be careful. Now we will place the front dress and the back dress right sides together and pin the shoulder seams. We are only sewing the shoulders, not the sides. I didn't show you in the video, but I used a lot of pins to make sure everything stays in place. When I'm working with slippery fabric like velvet or satin, I sometimes also do a few hand stitches to prevent shifting. And I after close my shoulder seams, we will search the seam allowance on the shoulder and press them open. Now it is time to add the sleeves. In the pattern there are two marks for sleeve pattern, one for the front and one for the center. I will place the sleeve and the dress right sides together. You can see the small notch here on the sleeve that shows the front side of the sleeve, and there's a matching notch on the front bodice piece, and we will overlap those. The center mark on the sleeve should line up with the shoulder seam. Also pin start and end points, and of course add more pins to keep everything in place. I will pin both sleeves and sew them. There is no trick here. It's pretty simple actually. All process making this dress are easy. There are no tricky parts. Just pin both sleeves and sew them together and make sure nothing slips under. Now, before closing the side seam, I'll prepare the ties, two of them. First, fold each one lengthwise with the right sides facing in and sew along the long edge. Then press one end, it's so the seam stays in the middle like you see here. Then sew that short edge at an angle as I'm showing now. And for the other tie, make the angled edge mirror. It is not super important, but it looks better if you do. After that, trim the seam allowance and turn the ties right side out. I am using a tool like this, but it is not necessary. Since the piece isn't too narrow, you can just turn it by hand and give it a press. And our ties are ready. Now I will attach the ties to the front dress just above the waist seam. The long part of each tie should stay inside, and the side with the seam, the stitched edge should face upward. I will sew them about 1 centimeter from the edge, which will stay inside the main seam later. Then I'm stitching both ties on the front piece now. Okay, now it is time to close the side seams. Fold the front over the back, right sides together, and make sure the ties are inside. Line up the sleeve edges, the waist mark, and the rest. We'll also closing the sleeve seams together with the side seams. So line up the sleeve edges, marks, rest, skirt, and then just sew along the sides and give it a search. Then press the seam open. Okay, now we're joining the neckline facing at the shoulders. I'm putting front and back right sides together, pin on the shoulder and sew them. And search the seam, pressing them open like I did to everything before. And I'm also serging the outer edges. I have already added interfacing to both the neckline and the facing. And you should have done this earlier. Now I'm turning the dress right side out and placing the facing on the dress, right sides together. Make sure your shoulder seams line up nicely with each other and the neckline. Pin everything together and sew. After we sew the facing to the dress, and since the fabric is stretchy, it won't give you much trouble when turning it right side out, but if you want, you can trim the seam allowance down to about 0.5 centimeter to make it even easier. Just make a few small notches around the V-shaped part of the neckline. That is enough. After that, sew an understitch on the facing side close to the seam allowance. An understitch goes all around the neckline. Then after, give the neckline a nice press so it sits really inside. Now we're pressing everything nicely. After finishing the neckline pressing, I serged the hem of the skirt and the sleeve edges. Now I'm switching my machine to the zigzag setting and I'll secure the neckline edges with a zigzag stitch. I am also finishing the hem and the sleeve edges the same way with a zigzag stitch, then give everything a nice press and our dress is ready. Well, while I was sewing the zigzag stitch on the neckline, the machine skipped a few stitches, but since I wanted to share this today, I will fix it later. It doesn't affect the understanding of the pattern. And before we finish, I just want to show you a quick comparison between the two necklines. The gray one doesn't have interfacing, and the dusty rose one, the one we just made, does. You can see the difference. The gray one more loose, and the dusty rose one more stiff. And you can decide for yourself if you need interfacing around the neckline or not. And this dress feels so comfortable, and as you see, it's so easy to make. So I hope you try it for yourself. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Bye.